resolute, committed to defending freedom wherever it's threatened. I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Reserve. I have no further speakers.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Intelligence, my colleague, Mr. Mills.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. 47 years. I'm going to say it again. 47 years. That's how long this evil regime has waged war, not only against the West and our allies, but Americans. Whether it be the Beirut bombing, whether it be the hostages, whether it be the violation of our own sovereign territory on our embassies, make no mistake about it. It was Iran and their regime who actually had waged war against America far longer than the strategic strikes to eliminate the imminent threat that this regime posed. You know, my colleague from Florida has pointed out all the different occasions in which this regime has targeted Americans. But let me point out the fact that not only are they engaged in the illicit trade and drug trafficking of Captagon, not only are they going ahead and leveraging sanctioned oil to countries like China and others to fund these proxy militias, but we're talking about the worst of the worst. The Houthis over in Yemen, Hamas, who indiscriminately murdered, raped, and the barbarism that they showed on October 7th there in Israel. Looking at Hezbollah under Hassan Nasrallah, who is responsible for not only the slaughtering of Christians in Lebanon, but the targeting of Americans with the expansion of their militias in Iraq. Hashd al-Shabi and Asali bin Haq in Iraq, responsible for more attacks against American troops and contractors, as well as for rocket attacks on our embassies than any other. The list goes on, Mr. Chairman. We can talk about the fact that we want to go back to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 responsibilities of declarations of war, but I would argue that my colleague on the left has also voted for the authorized use of military force as an abdication of those roles and responsibilities. I would also argue the fact, as the chairman had talked about, while you're right, a piece of paper isn't going to change things, it sends a clear message that this body stands unified and acknowledging that this state sponsor of terror will not have a reign any longer. Thanks to President Donald J. Trump and the decisive action to guarantee that their nuclear enrichment program will not continue to thrive, their mid-range ballistic missiles, their long-range ballistic missiles, and their ICBMs will not threat American lives any longer. Our service members who are deployed in the region can sleep peacefully at night knowing that they're not going to have Shahed 136s or other attack drones killing them in their sleep. But I'd also go ahead and iterate the fact that I can guarantee that the 6 new Gold Star families and those 6 new heroes will be proud to know that we haven't forgotten and that we're going to continue to acknowledge that this evil regime is the greatest state sponsor of terror. I ask my colleagues to support this resolution, and I thank the chairman for giving me this time. With that, I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York.
I reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Apparently it's Florida Day. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to another gentleman from Florida, Mr. Fine.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I approach this debate from a very simple perspective. I think when people say they want to kill you, you should believe them. For 47 years, the Iranian government, in their version of this hall, on the streets, on television, anywhere they can find, has yelled death to America. But they don't just yell it, they actually do it. Over those 47 years, it's estimated that 1,200 Americans have been killed by those saying death to America. Not all of those were military. On October 7th, Hamas, directly funded by Iran, killed 46 Americans. 46. We hear a lot about how bad they are. We can agree they're bad, but there's always a but. But we shouldn't do anything, I guess. Well, again, I believe that when someone tells you thousands of times over 47 years they want to kill you, you should believe them. This resolution makes a simple premise that we cannot allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. Why? Because of the second thing Iran seeks to do, create missile capability to deliver those missiles to the United States of America. And we have to stop them from creating the missile shield, the drones, the shorter missiles that they can use to overwhelm our forces in the region that gives them a shield to continue to deliver those weapons. We have a choice. We can say, well, they say death to America, but they aren't really going to do it. Or we can realize they've given us 1,200 reasons over the last 47 years to believe them. I hope this passes unanimously. It certainly should. It's 3 lines long, this resolution. It says that the House of Representatives declares it is the policy of the United States that Iran continues to be the largest state sponsor of terrorism. That is all it does. And if you believe like I do, when people say death to America, you should believe them, then you should vote for this, and this should be an easy vote. I thank the chairman for bringing this up today, and I hope all of my colleagues will support it. I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Montana. Mr.
Gentleman is
Zinke.
recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And while we all in this body mourn the deaths of our 6 heroes, we should remember earlier, as a deputy commander of the Special Forces of Iraq, I lost many friends as a result of Iran sponsoring weapons targeting. One of them was Command Sergeant Michael Stack, killed by Iranian weapons and targeting on April 2004. We should also recognize that Gaza, the murder of over 2,000 innocent civilians in unspeakable ways, would not have happened without the direct support of Khomeini and his evil regime and partners, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. Iran is an evil empire, not the people, the Khomeini regime, which controls their great Iranian people and does not allow prosperity. This resolution is pretty simple. For us all to recognize that evil exists. And the Khomeini regime is the epitome of evil. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Zinke.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from New York.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and I am prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I made it very, very clear that there's no disagreement in Congress that Iran is a bad actor. It is a state sponsor of terror. I've said it over and over again in my career. I think every member of Congress has said it over and over again. That's really not what this current resolution is really about. This resolution really is a stunt meant to try to cast a shadow on the imminent Iran war powers resolution debate that's going to follow this. This came up today, just last minute, to try to throw it in specifically because of the debate. Both things can be true, Mr. Speaker. Congress can recognize that Iran is a bad actor, as we've have done multiple times. And the President of the United States cannot unilaterally drag our country into war without congressional deliberation, debate, and authorization. The Constitution of the United States of America says that only Congress can declare war. So that's what the next debate will be all about. Do we want to live up to what we took an oath of office and take a vote for the American people to see where everyone stands and to be sure that we are not giving away our power to the executive branch of government, that we in Congress are going to do our job that the Constitution states that we should do. If the Constitution wanted one person to make that decision, it would have so stated. So yes, I will be voting for this resolution, absolutely, 100%. I have for so many other similar resolutions over the years. But I plan to also do my constitutional duty, to take my responsibility, not to give it away to the executive branch of government, not to shrink from my responsibilities. I plan also on voting for the war powers resolution on Iran in the debate immediately following this resolution, which we've passed numerous times in this House. And so it's a stunt, but unfortunately that's where we are as opposed to doing real business. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to close, but I'm going to respond to some of these comments as well. My colleague has said things that we agree on. Iran is a bad actor. Iran is a state sponsor of terror. He said there's no dispute about these things. My colleague has also said that he will vote for the upcoming war powers resolution. There's not a resolution that's coming before us that gives the president any authority or authorizes the military to defend the United States of America in any way, shape, or form against that threat that there is no dispute about, that bad actor, as it was characterized, that state sponsor of terror that everybody agrees on. There is no war power resolution coming that says, go out there and under these parameters, defend the United States of America. President Trump is utilizing his Article 2 authority, his constitutional Article 2 authority, to defend the United States of America against that imminent threat that we agree upon. My colleagues ask is that the president do nothing to defend the United States of America. My colleague talked about this resolution that outlines all of these historical actions and that we affirm Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror. It says it does nothing and acknowledge he's voted on resolutions just like that many times. That's true. And nothing has happened until we have President Trump willing to utilize his Article 2 authority to defend the United States of America against an imminent threat. I urge passage of this resolution affirming that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror, because apparently many of our colleagues have forgotten that they have voted on that, have forgotten that that's the case, have forgotten that that's the enemy that comes against us, have forgotten that they pose that imminent threat against us every single day, utilize every single opportunity that they can to attack Americans. I will close with this. I thank President Trump for the first time, avenging every single American that has been killed by the hand of Iran. That was not the purpose of this operation, but it is the purpose of my personal thanks. Thank you, President Trump, for avenging every service member that was killed by the hand of Iran, every contractor, every civilian that has been throughout the Middle East, every person wrongfully detained, every single person killed by that hand of Iran. Thank you, President Trump, for finally stepping up and defending the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 1099? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to
Speaker, I
reconsider is
request
laid
that
on.
the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays have been requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on the question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
I'll let you know in 1 minute, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the order of the House of March 3, 2026, I call up House Concurrent Resolution 38 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 38, concurrent resolution directing the President pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove United States Armed Forces from unauthorized hostilities in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Pursuant to the order of the House of March 3, 2026, the concurrent resolution is considered as read. The concurrent resolution shall be debatable for 2 hours, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs or their respective designees. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 60 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the resolution under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Trump administration exhausted every single diplomatic effort that they could with Iran, as did previous administrations. Iran would not see reason. Operation Epic Fury is a legal and necessary exercise of Article 2 authority to address the imminent threat posed by Iran. And, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in Donald Trump's own words, in the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's own words, the United States is at war with Iran. The question is, did Congress authorize the war as the Constitution requires? Did the President present anything before Congress? Did the Congress have any debate? Did any administrative authority come before the House Foreign Affairs Committee to testify? The answer to that is no. The question is, was there any imminent threat requiring the use of force? The administration has not presented one. In fact, the word imminent does not appear even once in the administration's own war powers notification. Can't find the word imminent. Did the Trump administration even bother making the case to the American people or to Congress? Just 8 days ago, during the State of the Union, the most visible platform as our president has, he could have laid out the rationale for military action as other presidents have. Instead, Iran was just a footnote in a record-long speech. This is a war of choice that was launched by this administration without authorization, without clearly stating objectives or a defined end game, and without explaining how they intend to keep Americans safe. The chaos unleashed will not be born by the president's family. It will be born by our men and women in uniform who will face retaliation from Iran and its proxy networks. It will be born by innocent civilians at heightened risk of attacks from Iran's aligned terrorist cells. It will be born by American families paying more for groceries, for electricity, for gasoline, all for Donald Trump's war of choice. Americans woke up on Saturday to the news that the United States is again at war in the Middle East. They don't know for how long, because the president has not articulated a clearly defined end game. Military action without a defined strategy invites escalation, mission creep, and failure. We should have learned this lesson already. Why? We should have learned it, or where? From Iraq, from Afghanistan, and Vietnam. As Benjamin Franklin once said, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This War Powers Resolution is simple. This is not a vote on the authorization for use of military force. This simply demands that the President of the United States come to Congress, as our Constitution demands, to seek authorization for what he himself has described as a war. Just abide by the Constitution. We all bring our hands up and swear when we're sworn and say, we will abide by the Constitution. You would think that the President of the United States would do just that. This War Powers Resolution does not prevent the United States from defending itself. It does not stop the President from responding to an imminent attack. It does not limit us from protecting our troops. You know, I've served in Congress for 28 years. And I've been in this chamber as this body has done its most sacred and serious work, deliberating whether to send our American service members into harm's way. It's a difficult vote. It's a serious vote. Without question, the hardest vote that I've ever had to take. But that's my responsibility. I took a pledge to the Constitution that I would follow it. You know, I was here for the vote after 9/11 to go into Afghanistan. A heavy decision. The president brought information in. We had dialogue, we had conversation, we had debate. We did something else. In the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we had hearings. We had administration officials come in. I wasn't even the ranking member or the chair or anything else. I was just a member of the committee. I could call the administration and say, I need to speak to a deputy secretary or the secretary. And they would come into my office and we would have this dialogue to determine whether or not we were going to go into this war. Has that happened now? For over a year, for all the times, not once have we had a hearing in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We've asked to have individuals that were negotiating. Unfortunately, some of them are not employed by the State Department, et cetera, like Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff, who all are friends of the president's, basically real estate negotiators, who they were just a half an hour in Geneva flipping back and forth from two major negotiations. And if it was serious, I wouldn't have been in the White House when the president was supposed to have been honoring individuals after we had lost the lives of 6 service members, talking about curtains and how I redecorated the White House. This is too serious a decision for me. I would hope for the President of the United States also. So, getting the facts, in Iraq, the Secretary of State came before and testified, went before the UN, talked to the American people. Now, I disagreed because I didn't see the connections after I got the information on Iraq, so I voted no. I agreed on Afghanistan, but the point here is the president obeyed the Constitution because he came to Congress first and allowed the members of Congress to make a determination. What has to stop, because what has happened year after year in my time here, I have watched Congress gradually relinquish its authority on matters of war to the executive branch. We've allowed overly broad authorizations for the use of military force to remain on the books. We have permitted presidents of both parties to commit forces without a vote. This war with Iran is the most extreme example of that abdication. The framers rejected the idea of a king, meaning one person making a decision without consultation, without giving any reason to this body. Absolutely rejected. We're not under an authoritarian government, like Russia, for example, where Vladimir Putin, he can go to war. He doesn't have to worry about the Duma. They're not a body that has the responsibility that we have in this Congress. So he can go on and fight a war that he created without worrying about being or having to talk and being accountable to anyone. Our founding fathers did not want that. They didn't want a king. That's why we were created as a body. And it's long past time for us to reclaim and stand up for that authority. For I tell you, even though he may want us to think he is, Donald Trump is not a king. And if he believes the war with Iran is in our national interest, then he must come to Congress and make the case. Show the facts. Show what the intelligence says. Come to Congress and allow us to ask the questions. We've had 3 scenarios. The so-called Gang of 8 met once. Then they got another phone call right beforehand. Then the so-called Gang of 20 met once. That's all we've heard from the president. So I oppose this war of choice. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? Each member here must make clear with their own vote where they stand on that decision. The president has initiated hostilities without a clear mission, and without a coherent strategy, and without a defined end game. And some members of Congress may decide after they see everything, we may not see it together in the same way. But the evidence and the case comes here, and then we take a vote. And as was the occasion for me back in 2003, I voted one way, the majority voted another way. President had the authority. Another time, I voted the way the majority voted. But each time they came to us. And that's what this debate is about. And that's what we need to do. Now, Mike, as I see this, the president has initiated hostilities without a clear mission, without a coherent strategy, and without a defined end game. So this is an open-ended, undefined military engagement is precisely what the War Powers Resolution was designed to restrain. We are not the Iranian parliament. We are not a rubber stamp Congress, or at least we shouldn't be a rubber stamp Congress. But in this scenario, we see whatever this president wants, my colleagues on the other side will just rubber stamp it. We should be a co-equal branch of government. And our duty is not optional. It was written in the Constitution. The framers gave Congress this authority because they believed no single person should have the power to take this nation to war alone. So today, we either defend the principle or we surrender it. I choose to defend the Constitution and defend the principle and do my job that I put my hand up and swore I would. Hard votes, easy votes, I'll take them all because that's what I swore an oath to do. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
My colleague talked about choices. Defending yourself is a choice. It's a choice that not everybody makes. Some people, instead of defending themselves, curl up into a corner and cry and turn their eyes. Some people stand up and they step into the fight and they make the tough choice of going through the battles that it takes to defend yourself. I will thank again President Trump for defending America from an imminent threat that no other president has had the guts to stand up to. What is that imminent threat? What was that imminent threat? That President Trump is doing his duty, his constitutional duty, his Article 2 authority to defend America against. I will tell you, it is something that almost every single member of Congress has literally agreed upon up until President Trump decided to defend America. Previously, almost every member of Congress voted to call Iran the largest state sponsor of terror. And tomorrow we will cast a vote on what was just debated about reaffirming that they are the largest state sponsor of terror. Nearly all members unanimously voted to condemn their continuous funding of terrorist proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. What does that mean? It means they give them money, they give them weapons, they give them training, they give them direction on where to find and how to kill Americans, and then they reward them for doing that. Almost every member of Congress has voted unanimously to condemn that. It was almost a unanimous vote calling their nuclear program a massive threat to the United States of America. My colleague over there voted in the affirmative on that. Almost every one of us voted to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. Those votes, They didn't just happen for no reason. We have seen Iran as an imminent threat against America, not just for the last 4 days, not just for the last 4 months or 4 years, but for the last 40 years. Why do they continue to be an imminent threat? Because they have never faced an imminent response until President Trump. Instead, we told them, when I say we, I could say America, but really it was my Democrat colleagues that told them this, told them how much uranium they could enrich instead of they can't do it, period. We told them when they could have a nuclear weapon instead of no. And on top of that, again, I say we because it's the America, but it was really my Democrat colleagues, gave them pallets of cash. That's a fact. Me especially, many of my other colleagues, I wouldn't take this away from anybody here. No one wants to see our military go into combat or war or conduct combat operations or battle or whatever word somebody wants to use to describe it. I do not want to see conflicts end in casualties. I wear many names on my wrist of friends that I have lost. But Iran's terror, which has caused the death of thousands of Americans, it has to stop. They don't warn us when they're going to kill our Americans. They are an imminent threat. They look for a surprise. They look for an opportunity, any weakness, any moment that they can go out there and attack us. They are an imminent threat. There has proven no other way to stop this imminent threat. Not by negotiation, not by accord, not by summit. So let's talk about this imminent threat. 3 U.S. soldiers killed at Tower 22 a year and a half ago. Sergeant Sanders, Sergeant Moffett, Sergeant Rivers. Imminent threat. Countless civilian vessels targeted by Iranian drones. That is what an imminent threat looks like. This one just pisses me off beyond belief. 10 U.S. Navy sailors captured and held on their knees at gunpoint by the Iranian Navy. Imminent threat. The October 7 attack, killing 1,200 civilians, including 46 Americans, supported by Iran. Again, that is an imminent threat. Very personal to me. Iran's killing of an estimated 1 in 6 American service members in Iraq between 2003 and 2011. Imminent threat. Beyond that, U.S. fighter jets lost, sunk off one of our carriers in the Red Sea because of Houthi attacks. That is an imminent threat. If you ask an American whether they want war or combat, you could ask me that question. I would say no. I don't want it. I've been in it. I don't want it for my children. But we do want President to stop Iran's imminent threats. If I said, do you want combat? Anybody with sense would say no. What do you want us to do if there's 10 American Navy men and women put on their knees at gunpoint by Iran? We want you to take care of that. Do you want us to go into combat? No. What do you want us to do if there's 3 American service members killed at Tower 22 by that imminent threat? We want you to take care of that. This is what taking care of that looks like. President Trump has been clear, consistent, and transparent. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. and he made every effort to address this through diplomatic means. Let me quote directly from a resolution that Democrats overwhelmingly supported, including my colleagues. The House of Representatives declares it is the policy of the United States to use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Leader Jeffries voted on it. Ranking Member Meeks voted on it. Speaker Emeritus Pelosi voted on it. Did they not believe it when they voted on it? Did they not read it? Did they not understand? Use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. We all know Iran poses an imminent threat to the United States. The only difference now is that President Trump is sitting in office. Right now, our military is shooting down Iranian missiles and drones that are targeting Americans in the region. If Democrats had their way and this resolution passed, they would force United States military to pack up. Stop shooting down missiles. Tell every American sheltering in place, every ally fighting against this regime, that America is no longer there to help. And while this does not fit the narrative of my Democrat colleagues, President Trump had the authority to do so under Article 2 of the Constitution and the War Powers Resolution Act to get the job done. And he has been transparent with this Congress. Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, General Kane, Director of the CIA Radcliffe, all conducting now 3 specific briefs, making our objective clear. Destroy every single piece of Iranian military hardware that can reach out and touch Americans or has been used to reach out and touch Americans. Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All I say, Mr. Speaker, is that if Iran has been an imminent threat for 47 years, the word imminent then loses all meaning. I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from New York, the Democratic leader in the United States House of Representatives, from Brooklyn, New York, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries.
The minority leader is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Queens, the great state of New York, the once and future chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Meeks, for his leadership and for yielding. I rise today in strong support of the American people, in support of our men and women in uniform, in support of the United States Constitution, and in support of this War Powers Resolution. As we gather here today on the floor of the House of Representatives, there are mothers and fathers across this country who are in mourning, confronting the heartbreaking loss of their loved ones in uniform. My prayers are with the families of the 6 American service members who have been killed overseas in Donald Trump's war of choice. We're thankful for their heroism, their bravery, and their patriotism, and may their memories always be a blessing. Mr. Speaker, every member who serves in this chamber has sworn an oath of office. It seems as though many of my Republican colleagues have forgotten that. So let me remind you in part as to what it says. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help me God. In this remarkable country, the greatest nation in the history of the world, we don't swear an oath to a king, to a political party, or to a man bent on desecrating the Oval Office. In the Congress, in the courts, and in the military, we swear an oath to the United States Constitution. Mr. Speaker, when the framers drafted that glorious document, they feared the rise of a monarch, a demagogue, a tyrant. Today we are here on the House floor because the Constitution, the binding document that makes us all Americans, is being trampled on by a wannabe king. As members of the House of Representatives, the branch of government who the framers decided would be the closest to the American people, to reflect the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the fears, the concerns, the anxieties, the life experiences, and the passions of the American people. We have a solemn obligation, Democrats and Republicans alike. We are all guardians of the American people and of the Constitution. We swore an oath that compels us to ensure that this president's modern-day injuries and abuses come to an end. We're at war now in the Middle East, spending billions of dollars to bomb Iran, when Republicans refuse to find a dime to make health care affordable for the American people, to make sure that everyday Americans can go see a doctor when they need one. This war has not been authorized by the people's representatives here in this glorious House. Article 1 of the Constitution explicitly provides Congress with the sole authority to declare war. There is nothing ambiguous about that. The framers made that decision because they were concerned about kings who throughout time plunged their people into unnecessary wars, impoverishing them or imperiling their lives by sending them off to a foreign conflict, often to pillage the resources of others for the benefit of a tyrant and his family. Sound familiar? That's why the power to declare war was given explicitly to the House and to the Senate, given to the people's representatives. Abraham Lincoln, as a member of this House in 1848, once profoundly observed the provision of the Constitution giving the war-making power to Congress was dictated, as I understand it, by the following reasons. Kings had always been involving and impoverishing their people in wars, pretending generally, if not always, that the good of the people was the object. This our convention understood to be the most oppressive of all kingly oppressions, and they resolved to so frame the Constitution that no one man should hold the power of bringing this oppression upon us. Then Congressman Abraham Lincoln, Republican Congressman, 1848. That is why we have advanced this War Powers resolution today. Donald Trump intentionally refused to get authorization from Congress for this war of choice, a war that has now exploded to more than 10 countries across the Middle East. The President has not even, Mr. Speaker, bothered to offer a coherent answer to the most basic questions that any commander-in-chief should address when making the solemn decision to take us to war. Why are we doing this? What are our objectives? How will this all end? Mr. Speaker, if this military action, this war, is so principled, why is the President unwilling or unable to make his case directly to the American people? If the tremendous cost to American taxpayers in terms of sacred human lives and our nation's precious resources is so justified, why does the president's rationale, why does the administration's rationale change every single day? Now, make no mistake, Iran is a bad actor. They must be confronted for their nuclear aspirations, painful human rights abuses, and repression of its own people, including the slaughter of thousands of civilians during the recent protests. It is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. It is a brutal regime that presents a serious threat to our allies in the Middle East, including Israel, Jordan, and the Gulf states. But the president has a responsibility to justify plunging America into another war that will cost more American lives and billions, if not trillions, in taxpayer resources. That's the president's obligation. And he has fallen woefully short of that responsibility. Now, the Trump administration has offered at least 5 different reasons to justify the war, all of which are built on deception and misdirection. First, Donald Trump claimed that the U.S. would attack Iran to protect the demonstrators who were risking their lives to demand democratic change. He even urged them weeks ago to rise up and seize state institutions. But as the regime cracked down brutally, killing tens of thousands of their own citizens, the president did nothing. Even as Donald Trump urged ordinary Iranians to take greater risks, there was never a viable military option for defending unarmed protesters against a brutal police state without sending hundreds of thousands of American troops into Iran. It was an empty pledge to the Iranian people that the current bombing campaign does nothing to undo. Second, Donald Trump and his advisors claim that Iran's unwillingness to negotiate away its nuclear program left no choice but for us to attack. Now, this is the very same person, Mr. Speaker, who told the country last summer that Iran's nuclear program was completely and totally obliterated. The same administration whose Department of Defense has said that the Iranian nuclear program was set back several years, and whose State Department said Iran isn't even enriching uranium today. Mr. Speaker, was the Commander-in-Chief confused in June, or is he confused right now? It was not long ago when America could be sure that we were preventing Iran from pursuing a nuclear weapon. The Iran nuclear agreement successfully did that until Donald Trump recklessly decided to pull the plug because he suffers from Obama derangement syndrome. The president has spent much of the past year trying and failing to restore the same negotiated safeguards he abandoned for partisan political reasons. And because of his failure to negotiate the guardrails that he destroyed, he has now taken us to war. Third, President Trump claims that Iran poses an imminent threat to the United States through its development of intercontinental ballistic missiles that could perhaps someday reach our shores. If Iran is actually on the verge of having that capability, the president should provide the evidence. But no such evidence has been presented to this Congress or to the American people. We can only assume that it does not exist. Fourth, Donald Trump said that he wanted to achieve regime change. Now, Donald Trump is an individual who promised Americans on the campaign trail that launching regime change wars in the Middle East has been one of the most foolish and costly things that the United States has ever done. Those are Donald Trump's words on the campaign trail. Candidate Trump said that if elected, he would never get our country into an endless regime war. President Trump has now done the exact opposite. Regime change wars are among the most expensive things that we can undertake. And yes, Secretary Hegseth, for decades, they have failed to accomplish their objective. Vietnam was a regime change war. Afghanistan was a regime change war. Iraq was a regime change war. And despite the incredible bravery of our heroes and patriots, because of failed policy decisions, they didn't work out. Even if the Iranian regime were to fall, we have no way to control what comes next, which most experts believe would be the Iranian Revolutionary Guard-led government rising up and being just as repressive and antagonistic as the current theocracy, and perhaps even more committed to the acquisition of nuclear weapons. Fifth, and most recently, Donald Trump said, "I had a feeling Iran would attack," as some sort of rationale for going to war. Donald Trump had a feeling that Iran would attack. The United States government has initiated a war, put American lives at risk. 6 patriots have already been killed. Thousands of American citizens are stranded in the Middle East, and he's plunged the entire Middle East into a war and chaos over a feeling. It's outrageous, it's unacceptable, it shocks the conscience. The last few days, 6 service members have died, and the Trump administration has acknowledged that more of our heroes are going to be killed. We have no concrete justification for why we are putting American troops in harm's way and spending billions of dollars on a foreign war while the affordability crisis rages here at home. A crisis Donald Trump said he would fix on day one, but instead, Republican policies have made worse. Taxpayer dollars should be used to drop grocery prices, drop housing costs, and drop health insurance premiums. Instead, Donald Trump is spending billions of taxpayer dollars to drop bombs in the Middle East. Mr. Speaker, the president's war is unwise, it's unpopular, unauthorized, unlawful, and unconstitutional. And in the United States, we serve the rule of law, not the rule of man. James Madison once wrote in 1788, "The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny." Our Constitution requires the president get approval from the Congress before launching a war. That has not happened. And that's why this bipartisan resolution, led by Democrats, is on the floor of the House of Representatives today. In their wisdom, the framers believed that they had made it impossible for a president to do what Donald Trump has just done, and that no other president has done before, launched a major war in the Middle East without the approval of Congress. That's what Donald Trump's time in office has been all about. Failure after failure, betrayal after betrayal, disaster after disaster. In his return to the presidency, Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump has left America less prosperous, less safe, and less free. He has hurt us again and again, failed us again and again. And now, by launching this unauthorized war of choice, setting fire to our Constitution. The American people deserve better. And as Democrats, we're committed to continuing to fight to use your taxpayer dollars to lower the high cost of living, to fix our broken healthcare system, and to clean up corruption. And we stand on the floor here today to make sure that those taxpayer dollars are being used in ways that are designed to make life better for the American people, not launching another endless war in the Middle East that is destined to cost more American lives and waste billions, if not trillions, in taxpayer dollars. We are here to stand up for the American people. We are here to stand up for our men and women in uniform. We are here to stand up for the rule of law and the United States Constitution. We will not rest until we end this national nightmare and continue America's march toward a more perfect union. Vote yes on this war powers resolution. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard a lot there. I didn't hear any discussion of Article II authority. I heard a lot of reminiscing, but I didn't hear any reminiscing about Libya either. There you go. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Chairman Emeritus of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. McCall.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaker, in 1979, the Islamic Revolution began, and a dark veil of terror descended upon the Middle East. Since then, Iran has operated as the nucleus of the world's most dangerous terror network. When the withdrawal from Afghanistan set the world on fire, the regime grew even more emboldened, fanning the flames of chaos and violence beyond its borders. From that moment onward, China, Russia, and Iran have been locked together in an unholy alliance, which seeks to destroy Western values and upend the global balance of power. Iran has played a key role in these malign efforts, arming Russia with lethal drones to massacre Ukrainians and fueling China's military machine through illicit sales of oil. Its terror proxies, Hamas, Houthis, and Hezbollah, have sown terror and instability across the world. This is a regime that values martyrdom over prosperity and chaos over peace. Their legacy of American bloodshed in Beirut and the USS Cole, to harboring terrorists after 9/11, to backing Hamas's unprovoked October 7 attacks that killed 46 Americans. A regime this murderous can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Thanks to President Trump and Operation Epic Fury, the dark shroud that covered the Middle East for nearly 5 decades has now been lifted. And the people of Iran, who have suffered so greatly at the hands of the Ayatollah, finally have a chance for freedom. This is an historic moment, one that could finally put the Middle East on the path to peace. In my judgment, Iran's decision to hit our partners with this was a severe miscalculation, turning the Gulf nations against Iran. Meanwhile, the regimes of the so-called allies, Russia and China, have abandoned Iran. Iran is isolated and now an island, and normalization between Israel and the Arab nations, as envisioned in the Abraham Accords, is now at hand. Despite these truths, congressional Democrats are seeking to force President Trump to halt Epic Fury mid-operation, risking the objectives of this critical mission solely for political purposes. Now is not the time to tie the hands of our commander-in-chief, and it's also not the time to hold up DHS funding. Even before Operation Epic Fury, the threat landscape was at an all-time high. President Biden's open border allowed more than 700 Iranian nationals to enter our country, and more than 18,000 known or suspected terrorists. As a former chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, I know all too well sleeper cells can execute foreign-inspired or directed acts of terrorism within our borders. And we have already seen that happen in my hometown of Austin, where 3 people were tragically killed over the weekend at the hands of the terrorists. Operation Epic Fury confronts this threat head-on, severing the tentacles Iran has wrapped around the globe to strangle peace and spread terror. The Ayatollah's reign of terror began with weak leadership from President Carter. It will end with strong leadership from President Trump. This war powers resolution is ill-timed and ill-advised. Congress must stand with the president and our military to finally close, once and for all, this dark chapter of history and pave the way for lasting peace. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman reserves. The
Not
gentleman
yet.
from New York is recognized.
I didn't reserve yet.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I got to say I heard one of the craziest things from my colleague just a couple minutes ago, that if something has been going on for 40 years, it can't be imminent. It can't meet the definition of imminent if it's been going on for 40 years. That's one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. If every day I walk out of my house and get my tail kicked by somebody, that is the exact definition of imminent. It will happen tomorrow. It will happen the next day and the next day until you finally step up, grow the spine, and prevent it from happening. One of the most absurd arguments I've ever heard. Now I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, now it is my great honor to yield 2 minutes to a person who is the greatest speaker in the history of the United States Congress, the first woman, the distinguished Speaker Emerita, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his kind words, but more importantly, for his leadership in bringing us together today and his great statement and that of our distinguished leader, Mr. Jeffries, that we heard earlier. I stand here as former leader, but also as one with 30 years of experience in intelligence. And I think this is a very important debate for us to have. There are 2 debates going on here. One is a debate as to the Constitution of the United States. The other is whether Iran should have a nuclear weapon, which we all agree they should not. But that doesn't mean the Constitution of the United States should be a casualty of that because you want to take a shortcut to the war. I rise in mourning for the brave service members who have given their lives in this conflict. We honor their ultimate sacrifice, and we pray for them, their families, and all who are injured in it so far. I had some veterans, Mr. Speaker, in my office earlier today on 2 different occasions, and we talked about the fact that having 6 people killed so early at the beginning of a conflict, initiation of hostilities, is unacceptable. What is our plan? What do we have in mind for them? So again, we all agree Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, and to that end, that's why I'm so proud at what President Obama did with this. He was masterful in diplomacy in forging an agreement that verifiably prevented Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. I have this book of statements from our colleagues who told the president we need to see the substance of the agreement. We need to see the validation and proof of it all. We need the communication to the American people. The president respected the Congress and came and gave reasons, and this is for an agreement. And this president won't even come and give us the data for an action of war. So let's be clear, this is not a debate about the merits of the war. That's another debate. It's a debate of the Constitution of the United States. The beauty of the Constitution, central to it, is the separation of power.
I yield the gentlelady another 30 seconds.
Okay. Essential of power, Article 1, and in that Article 1 is, very importantly, the power of the Congress to declare war. So, but again, let us be serious about our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution as we protect and defend the people of our country. That is our responsibility. That is what we will do. I urge our colleagues to vote in support of the Constitution, then go on to the debate of whether we should go into Iran and how we go into Iran. And I think that there'll be some mixed views on that, but that's a different subject. I urge our colleagues to honor your oath of office, honor the vision of our founders, honor the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform who've gotten us here today. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields. Does the gentleman reserve? Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 quick points. Just number 1, it is Article 2 of the Constitution that gives the President the authority to defend us against the imminent threat of Iran. I would say that if the Iran nuclear deal was so masterful, why didn't they bring it before Congress and the Senate, before the Senate? And the final point that I would make is this. Again, last Congress, 354 members of Congress, including 150 Democrats and Speaker Emeritus Pelosi, who just spoke, all voted to say, use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That was their vote. And I am proud to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Crawford.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Chairman, my good friend, Mr. Mast, for yielding and for his leadership on highlighting the error of removing the United States Armed Forces from a conflict. It will bring an end to a 47-year engagement. Mr. Speaker, make no mistake about it, the Iranian regime is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and despite extensive diplomatic efforts, the regime refuses to give up its nuclear weapon ambitions, its ballistic, cruise, and anti-ship missile production and proliferation, or its support of terror. As Secretary Rubio said yesterday, quote, Iran is run by lunatics, religious fanatic lunatics. They have an ambition to have nuclear weapons. They intend to develop those nuclear weapons behind a program of missiles and drones and terrorism that the world will not be able to touch them for fear of those things, end quote. When these murderous despots tell us what they want, that they want to eliminate us from existence, which they have said time and time again over the past 47 years, and now in a relatively short time frame, they attempt to sprint to the finish line by significantly hardening their conventional defensive posture, expediting the development of nuclear weapons, and showing their desperation by slaughtering thousands of their own people. It's clear that we have reached the point of no return, a point after which it's too late to respond. We all know that we wouldn't be here today if the president's name wasn't Donald Trump. Democrats have been calling for the U.S. to take action against Iran until Donald Trump did so. Last month, Democrats sponsored H.R. 7380, the Iran Act, chastising the Iranian regime for repeatedly shutting down internet connectivity and impeding the Iranian people from communicating during emergencies and exercising internationally recognized human rights. And earlier this year, the Democrat-sponsored H.R. 5912, the Disrupt Act, would require the executive branch to, quote, develop a whole-of-government strategy to disrupt growing cooperation among the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the People's Republic of Korea, which are the foremost adversaries of the United States, and mitigate the risk posed to the United States. This Democrat bill even states that the partnering of these 4 U.S. adversaries, quote, reinforces threats posed by each such adversary individually. Seems pretty clear to me that the Democratic rhetoric is argued in favor of cracking down on the brutal Iran regime, of course, until President Trump was the one to initiate the regime's demise. President Trump has a duty to protect Americans and the United States interests both at home and abroad. The administration engaged in earnest diplomacy to mitigate the Iranian threat. It became crystal clear, however, that the Iranian regime used the diplomatic process to buy itself time to reconstitute its ballistic missile inventories and nuclear weapons program. As the threat neared its apex, a point beyond which mitigation would be impossible, President Trump lived up to his duty as commander-in-chief and took decisive action. On March 2nd, President Trump notified Congress, consistent with the oft-criticized War Powers Resolution of 1973, of military action used to address this threat to the American people and American interests. In other words, the President has clearly acted consistent with precedent and has prosecuted this military action in a transparent and forthcoming manner, holding multiple press conferences and sending his cabinet officials and operational experts to provide multiple classified briefings on the status of the ongoing conflict to all members of Congress, as well as appropriate committees and their staffs. Mr. Speaker, passing the measure today would do nothing to keep America safe. It would do nothing to strengthen Congress, and all it would do is put America's safety and that of our allies at risk. It would allow Iran to once again rebuild its murderous regime and terrorize the world. Vote no. I thank Chairman Mast for his partnership and his leadership, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, I'm proud to yield 2 minutes and 30 seconds to the esteemed gentlewoman from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the whip of the Democratic caucus, the Honorable Catherine Clark.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding. Donald Trump has taken America to war without authorization, without explanation, without a strategy or an exit plan. 6 brave service members have already given the ultimate sacrifice. Others have been wounded, and Americans are stranded across the region. And what do we hear from our commander-in-chief? He shrugs and says, that's the way it is. And how about that ballroom? The American people do not want their sons and daughters shipped to another war in the Middle East when they don't even know what the mission is. They want a country where their children can do better and reach higher than their parents did, where they don't just survive but can actually get ahead, where a doctor's appointment is not a luxury. And what are they getting instead? Republicans have been raiding their health care, their Social Security, their veterans' benefits, all to enrich the billionaire class. Illegal tariffs jacking up prices, secret police murdering Americans in the street, a corrupt DOJ that covers for pedophiles while denying their victims justice. But today, you can stand with Americans who are entitled to know what the objective of this war is, what the cost will be. They deserve to know the sacrifice will not just fall on working and military families, but will be shared by the wealthy and the powerful. Today, you can join us in telling the President that the Constitution is not just a suggestion, that our country belongs to its people, to the American people, and that the power to declare war belongs to the people's representatives, and that 250 years later, whatever Donald Trump may think, that America still has no kings. I yield back.
Yields to the gentleman reserves. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Alabama, Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Rogers.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the chairman for yielding. I rise in strong opposition to this resolution. The intelligence is clear. Iran was attempting to rebuild its nuclear program. Iran was developing missiles that could place American bases in the region and our homeland at risk. The rapid expansion of Iranian missiles and drones posed an immediate threat to U.S. forces and partners in the region. And Iran's missile and drone arsenal acted as a conventional shield to its nuclear program. Faced with this threat, the president sought diplomatic solutions. But the Iranian regime refused to abandon their pursuit of a nuclear weapon. They refused to limit their ballistic missile arsenal, and they refused to rein in their terrorist proxies. Only when it became clear that Iran would not agree to a peaceful resolution did President Trump take decisive action and lawful action to protect the American people. As Secretaries Rubio and Hegseth have repeatedly explained, this is a limited military operation with clearly defined objectives. Those objectives are, number one, to destroy the Iranian missile, drone, and defense infrastructure posing a threat to U.S. forces and partners in the region. Number two, to degrade Iran's industrial capacity to produce additional drones and missiles. And number three, to destroy Iranian naval assets with the capacity to threaten U.S. forces and the free flow of commerce through the region. Achieving these objectives will ensure Iran can no longer threaten the U.S. or our allies. Past administrations have allowed the threat from Iran to grow and fester to the problem we have now. President Trump took decisive action to end the threat and restore the credibility of American deterrence. At this time, we should be focused on ensuring our warfighters have the resources and capabilities they need to succeed in this operation. We should not pass any resolution that will end this critical operation before achieving these military objectives. Doing so would needlessly risk the lives of American service members and American allies. I ask all members to pray for the safety of our men and women in uniform and honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. I also urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields, and the gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yeah, I'm happy to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky and the sponsor of this important resolution, the Honorable Representative Thomas Massey.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I thank the gentleman from New York. Mr. Speaker, James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson in 1789, "The Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive branch of power is the most interested in war and most prone to it. It has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war in the legislature. The Constitution is clear. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of our Constitution provides Congress initiatory powers of war. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of our Constitution gives the President operational powers of war to wage that war. Even if this body were to pretend that the 1973 War Powers Resolution supersedes the clear language of the Constitution, the President still has not met the conditions required by that law itself. The 1973 War Powers Resolution states plainly that the President may only introduce U.S. armed forces into hostilities pursuant to 3 conditions. Either 1, declaration of war, 2, specific statutory authorization, or 3, a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States. None of those conditions exist today. Iran has not attacked the United States, Congress has not declared war, and Congress has not granted specific statutory authorization. Beyond the constitutional question, here lies an even more important one. Why are we going to war with Iran? We owe our military service members a clear mission. And American families in my district want to know how this is going to help them pay for groceries. How does this make them any safer in their schools or in their neighborhoods? How does this help them pay for housing? Have we learned nothing from the laundry list of wars and regime change experiments we sparked across the Middle East that have racked up a total of at least $8 trillion of debt in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan? A sustained war with Iran will not stabilize the region. It's already ignited the region. It will radicalize new generations of terrorists, and it will send more swarms of refugees into Europe and the United States. Iran is not Venezuela. The Ayatollah was not a president. He was a religious leader from a region notorious for radical Islamists. And the United States and Israel turned him into a martyr. And in the process of doing so, we've already expended billions of dollars, and more solemnly, 6 American families must now lay to rest their sons and daughters. And for what? This administration can't even give us a straight answer as to why we launched this preemptive war. The president says we had to strike first because an Iranian strike was imminent. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense conceded there was no evidence of an imminent Iranian strike. Some told us this war was about nuclear weapons, but 6 months ago, we were assured our last strike on Iran decimated their nuclear program. So which is it? I think the most candid answer came from the Secretary of State, who told the press that Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war again. And that truth is the very reason why it is Congress that must decide war. If American lives are to be risked and American blood is to be shed, that decision must be debated and voted on by the representatives of the American people. And that debate is meant to be arduous. And that vote is meant to be hard. I have a theory. I think my colleagues don't want to go on record because we have a terrible track record of meddling in the Middle East. They don't want their name associated with this when it doesn't turn out well. But Congress cannot be bothered with its constitutional duty because for many in this chamber, it's easier to simply allow someone else's sons and daughters to be sent to combat without their vote. And to be clear, we aren't even here to declare war today. All we're voting on is a war powers resolution to reassert the Constitution, that Congress must decide questions of war. And if Congress wants war, then the Speaker should hold a vote to declare it. Some say Congress authorizes war when we pay for it, when we pass the budget bill. Here's the problem. We haven't taken on the hard work of defining the mission for our sons and daughters who are going to fight. That's not in the budget bill. It never is. And to the men and women who are engaged in combat, I sincerely thank you, and I pray for your safety. It is for you that I wrote this resolution. It is for you that all of us are here on this floor working so hard to force this vote so that you will have a clear mission that you deserve, so that you will know when you achieve it, you can come home. And with that, I urge support for this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Kentucky yields, and the gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge not supporting this resolution, but I am thankful that my colleague at least started to talk about that there is an Article 2 authority. He actually discussed that. And when is something an emergency? That's what a real debate can be. I've laid out very clearly a number of reasons why I believe in national emergency, why I believe that threat is imminent. A number of things that have happened. My colleagues over there said, well, something can't be imminent if it's been going on for years. To me, that would be the definition of imminent if it's been ongoing for years. But at least my colleague was willing to have that debate, although I disagree with him and urge not passing his legislation. I am pleased to now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Africa, Mr. Smith.
I thank you, the distinguished chair, for yielding.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, for far too long, Iran has held the world hostage with its nuclear threats, unbridled violence and hate, the pervasive use of torture and rape, and Nazi-like anti-Semitism. Iran is the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism. All diplomatic initiatives to secure peace, justice, and reconciliation with the Iranian dictatorship have been fruitless. President Trump is a man of his word and means it when he says Iran must never be permitted to acquire a nuclear weapon. Despite ample warnings and admonishments to negotiate seriously, which it has never done, Iran has defied U.S. diplomacy to end its decades-long quest to procure nuclear weapons and cease its despicable violence against Americans, Israelis, and the Iranians themselves. Among the many egregious concessions made in 2015 by President Obama to the Iranians was to get a deal included the removal of a treaty obligation that would have ended Iran's missile program and prevent the production of ballistic missiles that are today raining down on Americans, our military in the region, the Israeli civilians, and our friends in neighboring countries. In the debate on the House floor in 2015, I stood right here and said, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei criticized the call for Iran to end its ballistic missile program, characterizing it as a stupid, idiotic expectation, claiming that the Revolutionary Guard should definitely carry out their program and not be satisfied with the present level of missiles. Khamenei said they should mass produce those missiles, and mass produce they have, killing thousands and putting millions more at risk. It is estimated that Iran produces 100 missiles each and every month. I would remind my colleagues that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action signed by China, France, Germany, Russia, and the UK, and of course the United States, the P5+1, had a sunset date of October 18th, 2025. I remember asking for, during debate in committee and on the floor, sunset? Did anyone think that in 2015 that Iran would somehow matriculate from a brutal dictatorship to a democracy in those 10 years? I mean, that provided the Iranians the incentive to wait us out, because then everything would be lifted, even in that flawed deal. Let me also point out to my colleagues that the Trump administration has refused, I say again, refused, to have the United States bullied by Iran. And the distinguished chairman before went through one instance after another where they have killed Americans. Even when they bombed us in Lebanon, there was a young man in the Marines from my district who was killed in that brutal act of war by the Iranian dictatorship. So I just say I'm against this resolution. May God bless and protect our courageous service members, as well as the IDF soldiers who are fighting this tyrannical Iranian dictatorship with incredible courage, professionalism, skill, and tenacity. Yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I'm delighted to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, the co-sponsor of this important resolution, Representative Ro Khanna.
The gentleman is
Ranking
recognized.
member for your leadership. The world needs a new moral vision. America needs a new vision. We are seeing militarism erode the soul of our nation, leading to a regime change war in Iran and utter human devastation in Gaza. Simply put, we have lost our way. We are back to the law of the jungle, where might makes right and where the Middle East descends into a Hobbesian war of all against all. President Eisenhower warned that every warship built, every bomb deployed, every missile launched is a hospital and school foregone. A world in arms, he said, is stealing the hopes of our children. Today, this vote on Iran is not a procedural vote. It is a profoundly moral vote. It is a vote to direct our resources towards healing our own people, towards health care that saves lives, jobs that restore dignity, housing that shelters families instead of raining destruction on other nations. It is a vote to renew an America that leads once more through diplomacy, statesmanship, and principle. An America that strives to end cycles of violence rather than ignite them. An America that cooperates with other nations rather than bullying them into submission. An America committed to confronting child poverty, the climate crisis, and illiteracy to advance our shared humanity. An America that is respected in the world again. The world needs an America that finds its moral center, Mr. Speaker. Let us rise to this historic challenge. In this body, let us declare with courage and clarity that we reject this illegal and unjust war in Iran. Let us choose moral renewal over further moral decay. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member.
The gentleman yields, and the gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, let me tell you why not to trust what was just said as the gentleman walks out. Here's what he voted for. Iran's ongoing nuclear escalation poses a serious threat to the United States and its partners. That's literally what he voted for. Use all means necessary to prevent Iran from attaining a nuclear weapon. To me, that seems pretty damn imminent. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Europe, Mr. Self.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you for yielding, Mr. Chairman. I rise here in response to my colleague from across the aisle. I thought we were talking about the War Powers Act and not the Democrat social programs. That's what I'm going to do. President Trump's decision to strike Iran is not starting a forever war. It's ending a forever war. For half a century, the Islamic Republic of Iran has cast a shadow over the Middle East and trapped the region in a dark age. When the regime chants death to America, death to Israel, they mean it. The Islamic Republic is responsible for the deaths of hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans, thousands of Israelis, and tens of thousands of their own people, including up to 30,000 in just the last few weeks. Iran has slaughtered more Americans than any other terrorist regime in the world, and they will continue to kill Americans until they are stopped. Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism in the world by non-state actors, something that's not even contemplated by the War Powers Act. The regime funds, trains, and equips countless Islamic terrorist groups, including the Houthi rebels in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and many others across Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere in the region. For years, Iran has leveraged these terrorists to wage war against and kill Americans and countless civilians throughout the region. Just last weekend, in my home state, a gunman horrifically killed 3 innocent people and injured 4 others in Austin, Texas, while reportedly wearing a sweatshirt that read "Property of Allah" and a shirt with the Islamic Republic of Iran flag on it. While law enforcement continues its investigation into connection with the Islamic Republic, Americans must understand the enemy is within the gates. The current regime in Iran is the poster child for Islam and Sharia law, a culture of violence and domination that is totally incompatible with individual freedoms, our Constitution, and our heritage. Islam is an existential threat to our constitutional republic. By conducting this joint operation with our partners in the region to defend against tyranny, we are defending Western civilization. Furthermore, the Iranian people have overwhelmingly demonstrated a clear will to overthrow and change the radical regime. Tens of thousands of civilians have sacrificed their lives as a testimony to this point. By giving the green light to epic fury, President Trump is giving the Iranian people a fighting chance to alter the course of history in the Middle East and the world. As the Article 2 branch, the President is undertaking his constitutional duty as Commander-in-Chief to defend the United States from a tyrannical, murderous Islamic regime. Finally, I would also like to note that since the War Powers Act was enacted, every president, both Republican and Democrat, has argued that this law is unconstitutional. Instead of airing personal grievances with the President, the personal grievances with the American people and our service members would be better off if Congress focused on reopening the Department of Homeland Security to prevent attacks on American soil.
30 seconds, please.
And support the President in executing his Article 2 duty. While I agree that this body should engage in discussions about the War Powers Act, this is not the appropriate time. U.S. troops are currently in harm's way, and they need to have our full-throated support, full stop. I urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields on the gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
As I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, an esteemed member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative Warren Davidson.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Warren Davidson, and I love this country with a soldier's passion. More than 30 years ago, I enlisted in the infantry. My chain of command later helped me earn an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. I was commissioned as an infantry officer serving in the 75th Ranger Regiment, the 101st Airborne, Rakkasans, and the Old Guard. Then and now, I swore an oath to support and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Make no mistake, Iran is an enemy of the United States. As our military engages them, they do so justly. Unfortunately, they are not yet doing so constitutionally, and that's why we're here today. For some, this debate will be about whether we should even be fighting in Iran. For me, the debate is more fundamental. Is the President of the United States, regardless of the person holding the office, empowered to do whatever he wants? That's not what our Constitution says. Is he empowered to do whatever he wants for 60 or 90 days? That's not what the War Powers Act says. Is there any limit to executive authority whatsoever? I rise in support of this War Powers resolution today because the moral hazard posed by a government no longer constrained by our Constitution is a grave threat. The threat to a government no longer constrained by the plain meaning of words is not new for Democrats. Recall that Democrats needed help answering, what is a woman? Unfortunately, Republicans now want to claim they can't answer, what is a war? This debate isn't even new. Democrat President Harry Truman obstructed a vote on the Korean War, pretending it was instead a, quote, UN police action. Republican Senator Taft from Ohio insisted in vain that Congress should not shirk its duty to vote on declaring war or at least to authorize the conflict. Instead, Congress then, as it has in the past, passively cut checks to fund the war that they refused to authorize. This dereliction of duty is commonly mocked as an example of constitutional avoidance, and it contributed to the passage of the War Powers Act. President Trump's America First message was supposed to be a rejection of the globalist war machine, whose endless wars have left America less free, less safe, and more burdened by debt. On the other hand, President Trump has been reluctant to embrace war and has been incredibly successful in diplomacy. In this case, war may well be necessary, but it is far more pressing that we restore a government small enough to fit within the Constitution. We can afford a government that small and no other. America is a republic, not an empire. So I encourage everyone to honor their oath and support our Constitution. Vote yes on this resolution. I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio yields, and the gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, Chairman of the Subcommittee on South and Central Asia, Mr. Huizenga.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Chairman Mast. And my friend from Ohio, my Republican friend, knows I deeply respect him, his service to our country, and his consistency, frankly. That's something that we're not seeing from many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and that is to be commended. We have a different opinion on whether this is legal or not. We all know that the reason we are here is that for nearly half a century, the Iranian regime has terrorized the globe with acts of cowardly violence through its own forces and proxy militias, namely Hamas, the Houthis, the Hezbollah, whom they have provided military, political, and diplomatic and monetary aid. They have killed approximately 1,000 Americans and maimed thousands of others, both Americans and Arabs, with roadside bombs and other IEDs. We've seen all the videos online with drones and missiles hurtling into malls, hospitals, and hotels. This has to stop. During his first term, President Trump imposed a maximum pressure campaign in response to President Obama's lack of action regarding Iran, and that crippled Iran's ability to raise revenues from its oil operations and fund their terror network. How do I know that, Mr. Speaker? Because as a member of the Financial Services Committee, where all of those sanctions originated, I worked on those very sanctions. However, years later, the Biden administration found those moves too far and harsh on Iran and refused to enforce those sanctions. Sanctions are only as good and useful as their willingness to enforce them. During this period, Iranian crude production topped 3 million barrels a day, greater by more than a factor of 7 during the maximum pressure campaign, allowing the Iranian regime to continue to finance its brutality internationally and domestically. Congress attempted to reverse course by passing legislation to codify the maximum pressure campaign measures. That's why the House of Representatives passed my bill, the No U.S. Financing for Iran Act, by an overwhelming bipartisan majority during the 118th Congress to cut off the Iranian regime from the U.S. financial system. My friends who voted for that seem to forget. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle tend to forget that the Iranian regime directed an assassination attempt against the current president of the United States. And whether you like President Trump or not, no sitting president should be allowed to be a target by a foreign country without consequences. Peace through strength does not mean another open-ended war of the past. Operation Epic Fury is a defensive action using overwhelming force to protect the American people from an imminent and growing threat. Additionally, it cannot be ignored that Iran was producing conventional drones and ballistic missiles at an alarming rate until just this past weekend, and to provide a protective layer of defense for its nuclear ambitions and nuclear weapons development. The Trump administration has clearly defined.
Gentleman's recognized.
I'm sorry, for how long? 30 seconds. The Trump administration has clearly defined the mission, the objective, and the timeline. It's notified and briefed Congress on these operations. Simply put, Iran cannot, under any circumstances, possess the capabilities for having nuclear weapons. The Biden administration's official policy towards Iran summed up in one word: don't. That phrase underpinned one of the most ineffective foreign policy agendas in the 21st century. Give me a break. I urge my colleagues to vote against this resolution, hoping to score political points by tying the president's hands in the face of danger. It is time that we defend our liberty, our freedom, our neighbors, and this great nation in the face of Iran's systematic terror. With that, I yield back.
Reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I'm now proud to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, the ranking member of the House Financial Service Committee, the Honorable Maxine Waters.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you very much. I am especially concerned about Iran's stockpile of enhanced uranium, which could be used at any time. I want you to know that the president has said, I want that the nuclear capability of Iran had been obliterated. However, prior to the first Trump administration, the U.S. was able to monitor the status of Iran's uranium under an agreement called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JPOA. The U.S. negotiated this agreement with Iran in 2015, but Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. Now we have no way to track the status of Iran's dangerous uranium stockpile. This war must be stopped. I urge my colleagues to vote for the resolution.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think the last speaker just said she was worried about Iran's uranium stockpile and that it could be used anytime. That seems pretty damn imminent to me, too. I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Intelligence, Mr. Mills.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chairman is right. We just pointed to the 3 key things that you need in order to have lethal force against the United States. One is intent. I think that Iran and the regime has made it very clear when they're chanting death to America, the thousands of lives that they've changed with either maiming or killing American troops or civilians abroad, but also likelihood. We know that they're able to build 100+ missiles a day. They know they had ICBMs. We've now found out they had the hypersonic ballistic capabilities as they've targeted over 6 different countries. But you know, the thing that we talk about is the JCPOA, as it was just mentioned, Resolution 2231, where the administration tried to come up with an idea of a negotiation that led to diplomatic and peaceful solutions. But it was continually violated by this regime, as even the General Secretary Ban Ki-moon and Gutierrez had pointed out multiple times, as the Iranian regime sent mid-range ballistic missiles to the Houthis and into other areas to continue to attack Americans in the West. But the hypocrisy is what I really want to point out here, not the fact that we already understand the Article 2 authorities that the president has, which is well within the bounds constitutionally, not to mention the fact that this body, before I came into Congress, was already abdicating their roles and responsibilities under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, when they started doing things like AUMFs. But let's point to things like what we saw in Libya. It was very clear in 2011, as we see here in military intervention, that it was without prior congressional authorization, relying instead on a UN Security Council resolution and legal justification from the Department of Justice that argued that the administration had limited non-ground troop missions and doesn't constitute hostilities. Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what we have here, no ground troops. But it also goes on further to justify, under the United Nations mandates, international mandates, and the legal justification, to say that because they were focused on protecting civilians, not sustained fighting, and didn't involve ground troops. Well, I don't know about you, but I think 40+ Iranian civilians peacefully protesting for a change, being brutally murdered, being raped, being tortured, being slaughtered, being hung from cranes, being persecuted and imprisoned. I think President Trump stopping this after 47 years was protecting civilian lives. I think it's established that we had no boots on the ground. And I think that we have demonstrated the imminence, the likelihood, and intent of an evil regime to try and go ahead and attack Americans and threaten our way of life. With that, I yield.
I don't quite reserve yet. I would just let the Speaker know I think the gentleman about to speak on the other side, Mr. Raskin, also voted to say Iran's ongoing nuclear escalation poses a serious threat to the United States and its partners, and to use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. He must have thought it was pretty damn imminent, too. I now reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman's record.
I proudly yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, the Honorable Representative Jamie Raskin.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker and the ranking member. Yes, use all lawful and constitutional means. I heard one of our colleagues across the aisle just say, well, yes, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 does give Congress the exclusive plenary comprehensive power to declare war, and not the president, and we could be debating it, but the president's already taken us to war, so it's too late. It would undermine the cause for us to debate it. What a humiliating, self-defeating argument for a member of the Article 1 branch of Congress to be making. Don't you understand? That destroys our power to declare war. If any president can plunge us into a war and thereby defeat our exclusive plenary power over it. The framers weren't fooling around when they did that. They knew that the kings were constantly plunging their people into wars of deception, conceit, plunder, imperial avarice, fantasy. Constantly, the kings were doing that. They didn't want to leave it up to one person to decide whether or not to send a whole country into war and to put our sons and daughters at risk. That is an awesome, solemn responsibility that must be vested in the representatives of the people, all the people, which is why both the House and the Senate are involved in it. So whether you think this war is the most brilliant strategic breakthrough and moral cause since World War II, or you think it's an absolute strategic blunder built on lies like the last wars in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan, which cost thousands of lives and more than $1 trillion, wherever you are on that policy question, can we not agree as members of the Article 1 branch that it's up to us? We've got to vote on it. We've got to debate on it. I'm hearing very interesting, good arguments all over the spectrum on this. That's why it's reposed in the representatives of the people to decide it. Not Donald Trump, not J.D. Vance, not Tulsi Gabbard or anybody else in the executive branch. It's our decision. Everybody should be voting yes on this resolution.
Reserve.
Gentleman from New York, reserve. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard it brought up many times that we get to vote to declare war. We do. But it is enshrined in the Constitution that the president gets to defend the United States of America because of national emergencies. These kind of emergencies that the last gentleman voted to say, use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That seems like an emergency to me. I am pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New York, chairman of the Subcommittee on Middle East and North Africa, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past weekend, President Trump launched military operations against the terrorist Iranian regime alongside our ally Israel, killing the Ayatollah and many of his top lieutenants in the IRGC and the Council of Clerics. This operation came after almost a year of negotiations to reach a diplomatic solution to end Iran's nuclear ambitions, its ballistic missiles program, and funding of terrorism. But time and again, we were left empty-handed because of the regime's unwillingness to honestly negotiate in good faith. After exhausting all potential diplomatic means, only then did the president initiate Operation Epic Fury. And it's also important to point out that this engagement is not a new war. The Iranian regime has been at war with America for 47 years. They have been attacking Americans, our military, and our allies and our partners. They advocate for death to America. They hate us. They hate America. They hate Israel. They hate Europe. They hate the West. They massacre their own people for simple public dissent and peaceful protest. They send money to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other terror proxies around the world with the express interest of killing Americans and Israelis. They funded the October 7th terrorist attack that murdered and kidnapped not just Israelis, but Americans. And now, the Ayatollah and his conspirators paid the ultimate price. This is the maximum pressure campaign President Trump advocated for. This is how we secure our national security so that Americans can be free and safe, and our allies in the Middle East be free and safe. The long-term strategic benefits here in regards to peace and stability are immense. The only way to ensure peace and economic prosperity in the Middle East is to eliminate the single greatest threat to it. As far as the War Powers Act goes, the President is fully compliant. Congress was notified. Congress was briefed. The fact is, the President has 60 to 90 days to conduct this operation. And if Congress sees fit at that time, we will address it. But to try and unilaterally end this operation puts our national security at risk, puts our troops at risk, and puts our allies at risk. Iran is belligerently striking Arab partners as we speak, hitting civilian sites, trying to kill American soldiers, and in fact, they have killed 6. Many of my colleagues said nothing when Barack Obama engaged in a 7-month campaign in Libya, and in fact, when a War Powers resolution was on this floor, many opposed it, including Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader.
The gentleman's time has expired.
30 seconds, please.
Gentleman,
the fact is
recognized for 30
that
seconds more.
when you look back, presidents of both parties have acted under Article 2 and without the express authorization of Congress, and the former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, said it best when she said that Barack Obama could conduct the operation in Libya for 7 months and did not require congressional authority. Stop being hyper-partisan hypocrites and acknowledge the simple fact the President is legally justified. Vote no on this War Powers resolution.
Gentleman reserves. Members are reminded to direct your comments to the chair. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
And I'm honored to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Representative Jim Himes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for the recognition. I've been listening closely to this debate since it began. The arguments being made by half of the representatives of the people of the United States, the arguments as to why they should abrogate their constitutionally mandated duty are bizarre to me. Most of the arguments have been something that is not an argument, that Iran is evil, that they hate the U.S., that they mean us ill. The majority will find no argument over here that that is true. But oddly enough, the founders, when they wrote the Constitution, they didn't say you shall declare war only when it's not clear that the belligerent is evil or means us ill. It was a categorical demand that the representatives of the people, because blood and treasure would be consumed, that the representatives of the people not just be informed, but that they provide authorization. Now, I've heard the majority say that the danger was imminent. I'm the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, and I can tell you with authority that in the last 10 years, Iran's ability to create mayhem, while still very substantial, is at an ebb. The president himself said that the nuclear capabilities were obliterated, his word. Hezbollah has been largely rolled up in Beirut by the Lebanese armed forces. We have a pretty good sense of what the Houthis are capable of and how to counter them. So if the argument is imminent, that's absurd. There was no imminent threat to the United States Friday or Saturday of last week. And by the way, the argument that my friend from New York just made, which is that Obama did it, that's beyond absurd. I wasn't here when Obama did it. We weren't asked to vote on it, but I remember telling the vice president at the time that our Constitution demands congressional assent. Congress was not notified, it was not briefed, but that doesn't matter.
What matters is that the Constitution is clear that with 6 dead Americans, with our treasure being consumed, we must approve this action.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Vote yes.
30 more seconds.
It's not about informing. And by the way, this Congress was not informed. 8 members of this Congress were informed. It is about, and set aside, if you will, for a moment, the Constitution. Should the representatives of the people authorize an action that will kill many of those people and that will consume blood and treasure? Our framers certainly said the answer to that question is yes. Let's not abrogate our constitutional duty or our constitutional power. Vote yes on this resolution. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from New York. Gentleman from New York. Reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Let's poke a few holes in the intelligence ranker's story here. At an ebb, they've been knocking jets off our aircraft carriers. They've been attacking in places like Syria and Iraq. They killed 3 U.S. service members at Tower 22 in Jordan, but he can say it's at an ebb. And let's poke one more hole in this. As ranker of the Intelligence Committee, he did not vote to say that Iran's ongoing nuclear escalation poses a serious threat to the United States and his partners. That seems like an odd thing that the ranker of the Intelligence Committee wouldn't vote for. I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition to this dangerous and misguided war powers resolution that would weaken our country and serve as a gift to our enemies. The radical terrorist regime in Tehran, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, has targeted and killed thousands of Americans since 1979. The United States, Israel, and all of our allies are safer because the Ayatollah is dead. Since the taking of our hostages from our embassy in 1979 to the infamous 1983 Beirut barracks bombing that killed 241 U.S. Marines, to the attack on the USS Cole that left 37 Navy sailors dead, to the maiming and killing of thousands of U.S. military members during the global war on terrorism, the Iranian terrorist regime has always posed a grievous threat to the United States, and Operation Epic Fury is neutralizing that threat, and it's been a tremendous success. President Trump promised that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. He is acting on that promise to make the world a safer place, and he is complying with the law in doing so. Not just in complying with the notification requirements of the War Powers Resolution, not only through the consultation provisions, and not only with routinely updating the Congress, but also under the Commander-in-Chief powers. As a legal matter, the President of the United States doesn't need the permission of Congress to engage in hostilities to protect the American people. The Commander-in-Chief clause gives the President the exclusive power to command the military in operations approved by Congress, and it also gives the President substantial independent power to direct military operations so long as the President does not infringe on the exclusive powers of the Congress. And what are the exclusive powers of Congress? The declaration power. We have been silent on that. And appropriations, the power of the purse. This Congress has appropriated funds to defend the country, and we increased appropriations through the reconciliation bill this year. The NDAA is the policy of this Congress, which identifies Iran as a threat to our country. The Constitution was clear that Congress has the sole authority to declare war, which changes the legal status of the country. But the framers did not think that the language meant that the President and Congress have to work together all the time to turn the keys of the war power. The founders were practical men. They understood that Congress is slow to act. And Alexander Hamilton argued in Federalist 70 that energy in the executive is essential for national security, unity, secrecy, dispatch, and decision. And he contended that a single president is vital for defending the country. So Congress's real power is not just the declaration power, it's the power of the purse. So if my friends want to constrain the president, they have the authority to do it through the appropriations process. They do not have the constitutional authority to constrain the president from defending this country and defending our national security, advancing our national security, and ridding the world of this menace. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from New York.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, ranking member on the Africa Subcommittee, Representative Sarah Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I rise today as a voice for my generation and for my community in San Diego, the biggest military community in our country. When presidents from both sides of the aisle have taken military action, it's our service members, our young people who are sent into harm's way. They sacrifice their bodies, their mental health, their time with their loved ones, and even their lives for us. And while they're willing to make those sacrifices, we in Congress should be damn sure it's worth it. And too often, it's not. Too often, wars last longer and cost more than promised. Too often, regime change plans go awry, like we've already seen with the deaths of 6 service members, hundreds of civilian deaths, and rising gas prices. My colleagues will try to claim that voting for this war power resolution hurts our service members, but the opposite is true. We owe our service members a real debate before we send them into harm's way. Voting yes is a vote for our military, to ensure that their sacrifices won't be in vain. And if any of my colleagues vote no, they should come to my district, look our service members in the eye, and explain why they believe debating before we risk their lives is a bad thing. I hope every single one of my colleagues votes yes on this war powers resolution for our service members. I yield back.
Lady yields. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Baumgartner.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Iranian terrorist regime has been at war with the American people for nearly 50 years. Countless terrorist attacks, countless American men in service, women injured, and a persistent danger to the United States of America. President Trump's actions are a long time coming, well-meaning and well-deserved. I had the opportunity and the privilege to serve with the United States State Department during the Iraq surge, where I participated in putting together a joint U.S.-Iraqi interagency team to suppress Iranian-backed militia groups in Baghdad. These were very, very bad guys. One of the things that they did was use what's called an explosive-formed penetrator. Al-Qaeda and the Sunni groups would bake a lot of explosives on their roof and make big bombs. What the Iranians would do was make a special kind of bomb with a copper plate that would get an explosive, and it could punch right through our armor. One day, on a trip to Sadr City, I watched a massive what's called an MRAP, armored personnel carrier, explode in front of me from an Iranian bomb, and watched as that hulking metal burned to a crisp as American servicemen and women sought to deal with the aftermath. This terrorist regime has killed thousands of their countrymen, killed Americans across the Middle East, and it's time for them to come to an end. This is a partisan political maneuver by the Democrats, and they should be ashamed for what they're doing to put our servicemen and women in danger. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. I just would remind the gentleman this is a Massey bill. Yes, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Representative Jerry Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of this resolution and of reasserting Congress' constitutional responsibility. As the gentleman from Florida stated, the President has the power to react to an attack on the United States. He does not have the power to start a war. President Trump's illegal strikes against Iran are dragging the United States into another costly war in the Middle East. To be clear, I shed no tears over the Ayatollah's death. His brutality was responsible for the deaths of scores of his own people, and he directed terrorist proxies around the world. But his removal is unlikely to bring about the revolution and regime change the President seeks. We had a diplomatic agreement with Iran that did contain their nuclear threat with constant verification. But President Trump tore up that agreement. This unnecessary attack is a clear violation of the Constitution. Kings often plunge their nations into wars for plunder or avarice. The Constitution gave the power to decide on war or peace to Congress so that no president could act as a king. That is precisely what the President is doing. We must pass this resolution to chastise President Trump and to reassert what the Constitution provides, that only Congress can decide to commit this nation to war. I urge members to vote yes, and I yield
Gentleman's
back.
time has expired. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities against the president. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I inquire how much time each side has left.
Gentleman from Florida has 15 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from New York has 21 minutes remaining.
Very good. Pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I believe in symbolic things at times. It was 47 years ago that Iran began chanting death to America. I don't think it's symbolic that the 47th President of the United States is the first to do something about it. But only one number away from that is 46. And that's the number of Americans that, thanks to Iran, were killed on October the 7th, 2023. I don't think Iran had a meeting where they debated whether they should support Hamas to go and do that attack. They did it, and now we are in the position that we are in. You know, there was a press conference not too long ago where the speaker was asked, you're saying that the president did not need authorization initially and still does not need any authorization from Congress. And the Speaker of the House answered that question, yes. That was Nancy Pelosi when asked about an attack on Libya. President Trump is doing exactly what he is authorized to do, protecting the United States by making sure a terrorist regime cannot attack us using nuclear weapons. And while there may be some who want to wait until we're nuked to have that discussion, I'm not one of them. I support the president. I support his judgment. He has not let us down. He has defined the mission in clear, compelling, and concise ways to make sure they don't get nukes, to make sure they can't develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, and to make sure they don't have a military shield to support them as they do that. We don't have to have a debate before he does that sort of thing. That's what our framers intended. And the fact of the matter is I wouldn't trust some of the people in this room to have that debate if we wanted to put handcuffs around him before he did that. The president is doing the right thing. We should stand by him. We should trust Trump because he's not letting us down and he won't let us down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, the House Foreign Affairs Committee's ranking member on the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, Honorable Representative Joaquin Castro.
Gentleman is recognized.
Americans do not want and cannot afford another war in the Middle East. On Saturday morning, Americans woke up to the shocking news that our nation was at war again in the Middle East. There was no public justification, no vote to authorize this war in Congress. And why this war? Why now? If they say it's about Iran developing a nuclear weapon, well, just last year, President Trump claimed Iran's nuclear program had been completely and totally obliterated. In fact, Iran is further from perfecting a nuclear weapon now than it's been in years. Some claim it's to disable their ballistic missile capability, but Iran doesn't have a single ballistic missile that can reach the mainland United States, and we don't expect them to for many years. Is this about terrorism? It's true that Iran has helped finance and supply groups like Hamas and Hezbollah over the years, but they too are much weaker, much less capable after 2 years of conflict. So why now? Well, Secretary Rubio told us himself. He said that Israel was going to strike Iran, which would have triggered Iranian strikes on U.S. forces in the region. But rather than pick up the phone and tell Benjamin Netanyahu to stand down, the President of the United States buckled and decided to join their war. How is this America first? For 25 years, a generation of American service members and their families have sacrificed so much because of regime change wars in the Middle East. President Trump is now asking yet another generation of Americans to sacrifice in the hope that this time it will go differently than Iraq, Afghanistan, or Libya. This is Donald Trump's war. This is Benjamin Netanyahu's war. Your vote today will determine whether this is your war too. I urge you to support this resolution, and I yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from New York reserve. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
Let's be clear about what's happening right now. The United States is confronting a regime that has spent decades chanting death to America. A regime whose proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, just to name a few, has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of American troops. A regime that is working relentlessly towards a nuclear weapon. A nuclear-armed Iran would not just threaten the Middle East, it would threaten the entire world, and yes, civilization as we know it. And now, at the very moment when decisive action is being taken to dismantle the threat, this resolution would tie the hands of the President of the United States. We should not allow this to happen. We cannot allow this to happen. Decisive action against the Iranian regime is about protecting America and about protecting Americans. It's about protecting our troops stationed across the Middle East. It is about protecting our citizens abroad and our allies in the region. Iran, I'll say it again, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. For too long, the Iranian regime has acted with impunity as it murders its own people, tortures its own people, destroys its own people. There's simply no justification for allowing this regime and its leaders to continue to exist. America will not wait to be hit first. We will not gamble with American lives. We will not allow the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism to obtain the most dangerous weapon on the face of the earth. For that reason, I urge my colleagues to vote no on this resolution.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Arizona, Representative Yasmin Ansari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Islamic Republic is a barbaric, corrupt regime that has murdered, imprisoned, and terrorized its own people for decades. As the daughter of Iranian immigrants who fled this regime, I know personally what its violence means. Members of my family and friends have been brutalized and murdered by the Islamic Republic. My grandfather was imprisoned by the regime, and my family member was beheaded by them. The horror stories go on. So let me be very clear. I have spent my entire life opposing the Islamic Republic and its brutality, and I celebrate the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. At the same time, as an American Congresswoman who swore an oath to the United States Constitution, I am deeply concerned by President Trump's decision to launch an illegal war, because it is in fact illegal, against Iran without congressional authorization and without presenting a clear plan to the American people. War carries profound and deadly consequences for our troops, for the American people, and for the entire world. It's the most serious decision that a nation can make, and the American people deserve debate, transparency, and accountability before that decision is made. The Constitution is clear. The power to declare war rests with Congress. I want nothing more than a free Iran and safety and security for innocent Iranians. That requires more than force. It requires seriousness, accountability, and a real plan to support the Iranian people in determining their own future. Donald Trump has shown at every instance that freedom for the people of Iran is not his priority. Every few hours, the administration jumps to a new justification or objective for this war, but never is a democratic transition and self-determination for Iranians a part of the discussion. This was echoed last night by senior administration officials at the briefing to members of Congress. Ultimately, this vote is about the legitimacy of our democracy and of our Constitution, and that is why I will be voting yes on the War Powers Resolution.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I reserve again, I would just invite the previous speaker to explain if Iran posed an emergency, an existential threat to America. I'd be happy to hear it, but I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
I now yield 1 minute and 30 seconds to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Representative Ilhan Omar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to support this resolution. Donald Trump is unilaterally dragging this nation into an illegal and unjustified war with Iran. As someone who survived the horrors of war, I know that bombs do not build peace or create stability. Military strikes will not make us safer. They will inflame tensions and push the region further into chaos. Every time we abandon diplomacy, we choose destruction. We know who will bear the costs of this decision: innocent civilians caught in the crossfire and young service members sent into harm's way. The American people are exhausted by endless wars built on false promises and paid for with American and foreign lives. Congress must reassert its constitutional authority. I urge my colleagues to vote yes to stop U.S. involvement in another illegal forever war. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from New York reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard the same comments about Venezuela, but no forever war there. And that did bring peace and stability to the Venezuelan people. So I guess we're proving the previous comments wrong. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong opposition to this resolution. Directing President Trump to withdraw combat operations in Iran is not only foolish, it's dangerous. Pulling back now will solidify the regime's brutal grip on the great people of Iran and put the American troops in grave danger. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle are claiming we must pass this resolution because President Trump acted without an imminent threat to the U.S. forces in the region. Are we serious? No imminent threat. Okay, Iran and its proxies have been soaking themselves in American blood for nearly 50 years. Are we to believe that their 1, ballistic missile program isn't dangerous, 2, their nuclear program isn't anything, or 3, their vast proxy network of terrorists all over the world? That's not an imminent threat to U.S. forces? Our veterans know the answer to that question. They, unlike most of us, have been fighting Iran well before the start of Operation Epic Fury. They've been under imminent threat for decades, attack after attack. Iran and its proxies have seldom passed up an opportunity to kill Americans, and the other side of the aisle knows it. The President is well within his Article 2 authorities to defend U.S. forces from needless bloodshed. To do so, Iran's offensive military capabilities must be destroyed. This is not a war of choice. This is an intervention to prevent a future full-scale war in the Middle East that we must avoid. President Trump knows this, and so do my colleagues on the other side, but the difference is that President Trump has the foresight to make this difficult but prudent decision. As we debate in this chamber, our military is quickly dismantling the Iranian threat, and when this is all over soon, we will be much safer for it. God bless and protect our armed forces, and our prayers are with the fallen and their families. We are able to stand here today because of generations of their sacrifice. Semper Fidelis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Proud to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, the ranking member on the House Rules Committee, Representative Jim McGovern.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, nobody is defending the Ayatollah. There is no love lost for a brutal government that sponsors terror and murders their people. Iran has been doing this for decades. Everybody knows that. And so my question is this: why wasn't Donald Trump in favor of regime change until this weekend? Why did he campaign on swearing he would never send American kids to fight and die in the Middle East? Republicans can't answer because they were against war with Iran until exactly the second Donald Trump decided to go to war. And now they're all running around sounding like neocon lunatics. America can't take this level of gaslighting. I went to the classified briefing. There was no imminent threat. I guess unless Republicans want to redefine the word imminent to mean stretching back 47 years. This whole thing is just so transparently built on lies. Republicans went from imminent threat to regime change to nukes back to imminent threat in the last 24 hours. I'll tell you what this is, Mr. Speaker. This is Iraq 2.0. I still remember the lies about WMDs. I voted against that war too. At least George Bush had the decency to lie to people's face. And by the way, no congressional vote can legitimize this because there was no imminent threat. There was no UN Security Council resolution. So this war is illegal no matter what you want to call it. And it's not Donald Trump's kids that will have to go fight and die for their draft-dodging dad. It's not the children of the billionaire Epstein class. It's working-class kids who are going to put their lives on the line. Shame on Republicans. I'm sick of this BS. We're spending billions of dollars a day on a war, and we can't even get Republicans to join us to expand health care in America. How the hell is this America first? You guys broke your top campaign promise. Good luck with that. I hope the defense contractor money was worth it. Shame on you all. The mask is off. You're all just a bunch of
Your time's
pathetic
expired.
neocon warmongers.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Issa.
Before I begin, in addition to the disparaging of the president, Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker implied that this was about money from defense contractors. Shame on anyone who would say that. 47 years ago, I was a young captain, a first lieutenant about to be captain, when the war was declared against us. Iran has been at war with us for 47 years and at war with the world. In 1982, I was a young captain when they killed 220 Marines, their bombs, their proxies in Lebanon. To say that, in fact, this is not defense of America against the country that every day for 47 years has said, we are the evil ones and we must be destroyed. So first of all, the right to defend, going back to Thomas Jefferson, has not been a question of the Constitution. It has been an obligation of the president. So to invoke the War Powers Act as though this is not defense, and then to imply that there's any purpose other than to recognize that this pervasive threat that has killed Americans and others around the world decade after decade was getting stronger and stronger. And even though I hear that there was no UN, there was no this or that, I have visited Ukraine, where their assembled parts are killing Americans, Russians, Ukrainians, anyone they want because they're an exporter of terror. The fact is, around the world, we are at war with this country of Iran. In my ancestral country of Lebanon, today their proxies are firing on Israel in support of their hatred of the little Satan, we being the big Satan. So, am I defending the actions of the president? You betcha. And I have defended it for my entire quarter of a century here, regardless of the party. The only thing I can't defend is the idea that we have placated and empowered Iran time and time again so that today the job is harder and longer than it otherwise would be. Lastly, there is no question if we withdraw or cease at this time, we are saying to the next Ayatollah, the next supreme leader, that in fact the United States will not see this through, and we will be empowering them to spread their terror, to have more American blood on their hands as a result. I urge no on this resolution because it is not only unconstitutional, but it is so ill-advised at a time in which we are defending America. I thank the gentleman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. And I would point out that the next speaker as well, it would appear, voted to say, use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. He clearly thought there was a pretty damn imminent threat going on there, but I look forward to hearing the remarks. I reserve.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is
Also
recognized.
thought the president would follow the Constitution. I yield 1 minute and 30 seconds to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Representative Chris Deluzio.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from New York. I support the bipartisan war powers resolution, and we find ourselves once again in a foolish regime change war, much like the one that my generation was sent to serve in Iraq, that cost thousands of lives, $1 trillion+ dollars. And I've heard lots of justifications on the other side for why this, number one, isn't a war. Well, I heard the gentleman from New York call it a war. It's what it is. The defense secretary has called it a war. That's what this is. I've seen pointing to different authorities here and there between the laws that might justify this. The Congress has not declared war. The Congress has not provided a statutory authorization for the use of military force. And the third condition of the War Powers Resolution that could allow the President to do such a thing is that the United States is under attack. We, of course, were not under attack when the President started this war that we don't need to fight today. That's the War Powers Resolution. Those are the three bases that a president can use force under the War Powers Resolution. And let's not forget, the American people want life less of a ripoff here at home. They want health care they can afford, housing, I go on and on. What they don't want is Americans coming back in flag-draped caskets and billions of dollars spent overseas. Today, I asked Trump administration officials for the cost of this war. They can't answer the question. Those are the basic things you got to know before you send Americans to fight. We should support this resolution and put a stop to this now. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, your service, and your sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H-Con Res 38, which would limit the President's ability to protect the American people from Iran's terrorist regime. I believe that this resolution, and may be misunderstood, sends a troubling message to our troops and a perhaps interpreted welcome message to our enemy. The Wars Power Act is very clear. Enacted in 1973, requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of deploying forces, and the President has 60 days before he must seek congressional approval. President Trump has clearly acted within the provisions of the War Powers Act. President Obama, on the other hand, used these authorities to launch operations in Libya for over 7 months, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. President Biden invoked the same authorities for strikes against threats in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, yet no resolution to limit those presidents was brought up in this House by our colleagues. So, as Secretary Rubio said, and he described in great detail, there was an imminent threat upon the United States from Iran and our allies. Speaker Johnson also warned the idea that Congress would now take away the ability of the commander-in-chief is dangerous to the threat and the safety of the United States of America. We must remember who we're dealing with. We're dealing with Iran. It's been a terrorist state for 47 years. Its proxies range from Hezbollah to Hamas to the Houthis, and the list goes on. And directly and through these proxies, Iran has maimed and killed thousands of Americans. They orchestrated the massacre on Israel on October 7th. We know this. They are, in fact, doing their very most to continue enriching uranium to make weapons grade. According to Special Envoy Witkoff, just the other day, the Iranian negotiators opened negotiations by bragging about presently controlling 460 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, enough for weapons-grade material for 11 bombs within 4 to 6 weeks. Because of this regime's reign of terror, their own civilians rose up and protested, Mr. Speaker, and over the last 2 months, there are reports that as many as 90,000 Iranian civilians were murdered. President Trump has strategically developed regional trust throughout the Middle East. This is why we have a strong coalition in the region to confront this threat. Today, Iran is an island, thanks to the strategy of the Trump administration. The Iran of the past, one that oppresses and commits terrorism and all kinds of atrocities on its own people in the world, is history. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Representative Lloyd Doggett.
Gentleman's recognized.
From his first day in public office, President Trump has made it clear that he wants to rule America by imperial decree. He didn't want to be king just for a day in America. He wants to be king of the universe. Congress is just a nuisance that can be avoided. The courts, an occasional speed bump. And international law, that's just a suggestion to this president. In his decree declaring war on Iran, he glibly responded to the loss of American life by saying, "That's the way it is." With no clear objectives, no approval from the Congress, no commitment to keep the ground troops out, more American deaths and billions of taxpayer dollars wasted will be the way it is. And we know that in this regard, Trump is not America first. At best, he is American second, as Secretary Rubio confessed this week. Trump was too weak to follow President Bush's wise example of saying no to Netanyahu. He has dragged us into a war that has no imminent threat. He has committed us to a war that will further destabilize an already unstable region of the world. And in Trump's own words, this war will go on as long as it takes. Well, the last war like that cost 4,400 American lives and $2 trillion of taxpayer money. While certainly I do not mourn the death of any of these despots in Iran who have done so much harm, under Trump's clueless approach, we may just be replacing one tyrant with another. We already see what's happening to our embassies, our military facilities, our airports, the many Americans stranded abroad. I urge approval of this resolution to stop Trump's forever war. Unless it is approved, Trump will be here only encouraged to grab more and more power on his drive for total authoritarian one-man rule in this country and the world. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I figured something out. If my colleagues keep saying that 4 days is forever, maybe that's why they can't talk about what imminent threat means. They can't figure out the definition of these things. Imminent threat. I've done pretty well to define what makes Iran an imminent threat. They don't want to speak about that and don't even want to acknowledge it a little bit, that, hey, maybe there's even a little chance that Iran could attack us this day or this. Don't even want to acknowledge it the slightest bit. Want to paint it as though it's just black and white, no shot whatsoever, no threat at all coming from Iran, even though they voted for things to say use all means necessary to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. It's amazing to me, and we know they have difficulty defining other words as well. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
I never heard Donald Trump say it was an imminent threat. I yield now 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Representative Jimmy Gomez.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of this war powers resolution. This is a war of choice disguised as a war of necessity. During the last several days, President Trump offered a shifting list of justifications: regime change, retribution, helping protesters, stopping Iran's missile and nuclear weapons program, a program that Trump claimed just last year that he obliterated, and a ballistic missile program that the Department of Defense says is not going to be capable of reaching the U.S. until 2035. Then Secretary of State Marco Rubio offered another, that he had to strike first in case Iran might retaliate after a possible Israeli attack. Think about that. Not because Iran posed an imminent threat, not because Congress authorized war, but because someone else might attack. This is not a strategy. This is cherry-picking facts and lying to the American public to justify a predetermined decision to launch a war. So Americans asking two questions: why are we doing this, and how does it end? The Constitution is clear. The president cannot start a war alone. So we need to make sure that the people's representatives are involved, because once troops are in harm's way, missions expand and working families get a knock on the door that changes their lives forever. The cost of this war will not just be measured by dollars spent, but in lives lost, bodies broken, and conflicts that rarely stay confined to where they began. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I reserve. I am prepared to close it. The gentleman is prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves.
Ready to close.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, first let me be clear about what this resolution is not. It's not a vote for or against war with Iran. It's not an authorization for use of military force. It does not prevent the United States from defending itself. It does not restrict our U.S. military from protecting our troops or our assets or our interests. You may have heard some of those claims from the other side today, they are wrong. So what is this War Powers Resolution? What is it? It's simple. It simply requires hostilities to stop unless and until Congress does what the Constitution says it should do, authorize them. That's what the Constitution says. It affirms a basic principle. No president can take this action or take this nation to a war against whomever, whenever that president wishes to do it without congressional authorization. This is a war. The administration has said so themselves. We've heard many members on the other side of the aisle say this is a war. This is a war. But it is a war of choice, not a war authorized by the United States Congress. The administration's own War Powers Notification, and if you haven't read it, we'll give it to you. They do not use or mention the word imminent at all, not once. The administration has presented no imminent threat. Why? Because it cannot. My colleagues keeps using, I want to give him the definition of the word imminent. And if it was so imminent, Donald Trump didn't do anything when he was the president before. How long? How long will this war last? We don't know. The administration doesn't seem to know. Their stated objectives are expansive and shifting. Every day, they seem to shift. One day I heard them say it was regime change. The next day I heard them say it's nuclear weapons. Then after that it was ballistic missiles. And then we heard the Secretary of State say it's Israel was going to strike first, and so we felt we had to, otherwise Iran would have struck first. You know, Mr. Speaker, this administration's case for war makes the Bush administration's weapons of mass destruction story look like a well-documented PhD dissertation. Now, to the members of Congress who disagree with my opposition to this war, I disagree because I've listened and I've heard and I've been wrong. I disagree with this war. But I say to them, if you disagree with this war, it is your prerogative. But you should vote. We should have a vote. This vote is not about whether or not you support military action. It's about whether you believe Congress should have a say